Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Well, lately I have been trying to not touch on politics very frequently on this channel for a couple of reasons. The point of the channel is really not politics. If you've followed the channel any length of time, you know how I feel. And the other thing is there are just tons of political channels out there that I would say do a much better job than I do. And in fact, if anybody's interested, what I could do is maybe do a brief video on who I actually watch on YouTube as far as the current political situation goes. But something just happened that I feel the need to comment on. Because something just happened with one of my sort of infrequent customers. But, you know, when I do a job for them, it's a decent amount of money. So as people who have followed this channel for any length of time know, I have a scientific background. So I have a master's degree in molecular biology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. And when I completed that, I went to work for the Upjohn Company in Kalamazoo, Michigan. As a scientist, I actually ran day-to-day operations of a lab that what we did was we screened soil bacteria cultures for antibiotic production. And when I mention Upjohn, you know, people my age, they'll go, oh yeah, Upjohn got merged into Pfizer in the 1990s, but they were, before that, in one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the United States. Rogaine, that was us. We manufactured a few different antibiotics, erythromycin, a couple of others that, back off the top of my head, I don't remember. But also over-the-counter, kaopectate, that was us. You can still get that. But again, Upjohn got merged into Pfizer, and actually there's not much left in Kalamazoo as far as any research in the former Upjohn buildings. But I got to a point when I was doing research that I realized that to go any further, I was going to have to go back to school and get a PhD. I was in my early 30s, not crazy about the idea of going to back to school. So I went into laboratory instrumentation sales. So I did that for the better part of 30 years. It was pretty cool. Got to interact and talk with scientists almost every week of my career. And I sold instruments that went on up over $100,000. So mainly imaging instruments. In fact, one of the companies I worked for, we actually used Canon equipment. We had an imaging system. We used a Canon EF 50mm f1.2 lens, which we actually reversed engineered how to control the focus and aperture on it. Not because we wanted to do that automatically, but because we wanted to be able to control that from the computer. When you know, the scientist was looking at a sample, they could just use keys to focus. So we actually did that. Not sure Canon minded because we were selling their products. And I actually got to carry a 50mm f1.2 around with me, and since I shot Canon equipment, that worked out pretty well, right? So we frequently do these product shows. So there were a few companies that had vendor shows for the vendors in the life science research market to show their products to the end users. So these companies would get, you know, a large conference room, or a lot of these research buildings, modern ones, have a big atrium. And so we would go and buy space at a table and put out, you know, smaller instruments. Some of the stuff I sold was way too big to stick on a table, and then have all our literature for everybody to come in. And this got more and more important after 9/11, because prior to that, universities, you could just walk into these research buildings and walk around and go into labs and talk to people. After 9/11, that started getting shut down. Of course, corporate biotech and pharmaceutical companies, which we also did those shows there, already were pretty much locked down. You can't just walk into a corporate facility without checking in and getting escorted and so on. So I'm getting to the point. But I became very friendly with the owner of one of these vendor product show companies, and she actually hired me to photograph a show a couple of times where I would just bring my camera equipment, and in addition to having my company's information on a table, I'd run around and take pictures of the show and make some extra money doing that. So, what happened? Well, last year she contacted me and she said, hey, we got some shows coming up in Chicago. I'd like to hire you to photograph one of them. And I was like, sure. And again, for a decent amount of money. It was probably ended up being about a 2 to 3 hour job. And unfortunately what happened was the show that she wanted me to do, they had to cancel because they did not get enough vendors to sign up for the show. So, it was like, oh, well, let's plan on maybe doing it next year when you have more shows in Chicago. So, this coming week, there's shows here in Chicago. And I emailed her a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, I see you have shows here. There's one University of Chicago. There's one at the at Illinois Institute of Technology. Would you like me to do that? Her response was, really can't. Trump's policies have devastated the research market, and we are barely holding on. We're running these shows, but I just cannot spend the money to have you do this. So, I'll survive. I have my photojournalism that I do, but it would have been nice to have gotten that gig. But I just kind of want to segue here into, we have people in power now that have absolutely no clue about what they're doing with regards to research and science. The United States used to be the envy of the world when it came to scientific research. I mean, people came here from all over the world to study science, to learn how to do research. And many times they'd go back and take that knowledge with them, but many times they would stay as immigrants and do research here to the point of making discoveries and starting new companies to commercialize those discoveries. And so what is happening now is that's getting nuked. And we are no longer going to be the envy of the world when it comes to science. As a matter of fact, scientists are leaving this country, taking their research with them. So, when you've got people like RFK Jr., who is clueless, I'm sorry. As part of getting that master's degree, I had coursework in immunology and virology, and I have forgotten more of that than RFK Jr. or any of these other idiots will ever know. So I wanted to talk about this because I don't think that people understand how much damage is being done to the reputation of this country, and that we have a real opportunity this year to put a damper on it because Congress is going to flip. The big guy in charge is freaking out about this. He's going to probably do everything he can to keep people from voting, but it's probably not going to work. So just saw a poll come out that said if there was a redo of the election today, he would lose by 8 percentage points at least. So I apologize for getting into the politics thing again, but I think it was really important for me to say this. It is affecting businesses all over this country. Of course, luckily his tariffs got the kibosh. Unfortunately, he's trying to do an end run using another piece of law to re-implement tariffs. So we'll see how that goes. But you really can't sleepwalk through life and not pay attention to what's being done. And I know a lot of people do that. I think people are starting to wake up. Most recent elections, the Republicans had been killed in actually red districts. So there's hope. Anyway, that's it. If this was interesting to you, hit that like button. You can leave comments below, but of course I'm going to moderate very tightly. I will not argue with people for whom no amount of data that proves they're wrong makes any difference. So you probably want to not expend the energy commenting if you're going to, you know, come up with some of the ridiculous stuff that I've seen people come up with. That's it for now. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you in the next video, and it will be about cameras and photography.